What's up? Welcome into today's episode of Pushing the Pile, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. I'm Mike Renner, joined today by Kyle Long and Leger Douzable, and we got Wildcard Weekend on tap. Regular season's over. That means 6 games this weekend. We're going to get to all of them, the matchups that will decide them here in just a second, but we wanted to start, as we usually do on this Thursday show, with some bold predictions that we think will come true this wildcard weekend. Leger, I want to start with you. What do you got for us? Bring some heat. Let's set the tone early here.
Yeah, I'm going to set it early, man. I think the Washington Commanders will go on the road with a rookie quarterback and pull off the upset versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Kyle and Mike, don't know if you know this, but the last time a rookie quarterback won a road playoff game, you got to go back to 2012. And that was Russell Wilson. I think Jaden Daniels does it. We've talked all season long about how this guy is cool, calm, collective, knows exactly where to go with the football, and he's used his mobility more. And I think he will have to do that versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I have Jaden Daniels and the Commanders going on the road and winning a road playoff game this weekend.
I like the nugget that you dropped there about Russell Wilson. I had the pleasure of growing up and playing and competing against Russell Wilson, and that guy was wise beyond his years and definitely as prepared as they come at the quarterback position from the very jump. And that's why he had success. Obviously, the defense was great, but he was able to play within himself. And that's one thing we've seen from Jaden Daniels all year long. The moment's never been too big. He's the unquestioned leader. I reach out and I talk to my old teammates that are in Washington protecting this guy, and they just rave about his leadership. They don't even lead with his talent. They lead with his cool, calm, and collected attitude. So I love that from you. I think me and Mike wouldn't be surprised if the Commanders pulled it out either. Mike, is it your turn or is it my turn for a bold prediction?
You hit it up. I'll just say this, though, about Jaden Daniels. I do think that they are going to let him rip in a way that they just didn't during the regular season. Now he set, I believe, the modern day record for scrambles at the quarterback position. Like, that's a big aspect of his running, but they didn't really use him that often as a true runner. Now it's part of the offense, Correct. But it's not a major part of the offense. With how much of a threat he is, I mean, he's truly their most dynamic runner. I think I'm not calling a run in this game that's not an option, that doesn't have the chance of Jaden Daniels pulling it and taking it, 50 plus to the house, because he's more than capable of that. So if I'm Cliff Kingsbury, the entire playbook's at my disposal. And when that's the case, I'm letting Jaden Daniels take over this game. So I like that bold prediction from you. So Kyle, you can let yours rip now.
I was gonna say before
the
Kyle goes
too.
Yeah, I was gonna say before Kyle goes, Mike, to that point, right? You talked about how they haven't really used him enough in the run game. Anytime the game's on the line, though, they always put him in the run action. I mean, we saw that versus the Eagles game, right? 3rd and 14, 3rd and 4. Like, there's a zone read option, and Jaden Daniels most likely is keeping the ball because he knows he's that dynamic with the ball in his hand. So I didn't mean to cut you off, Kyle, but to Mike's point, I think that you do see an uptick in him using his mobility in the playoff game because it is a true weapon for the Washington Commanders.
I know that Tampa Bay Buccaneers second level and third level have a lot of talented guys who can cover a lot of ground, but Jaden Daniels is just a little bit different. And add to the fact that injury report is longer than my driveway, I got a lot of questions about how you're going to handle Jaden Daniels in certain situations. If a guy needs a breather, he brings out the second string player. Is he going to have the presence of mind to understand that my usual read on this play has to change a little bit, because it's not just, Joe Flacco back there at quarterback. Jaden Daniels can ruin your defense, and he's a real backbreaker on those third downs. You talked about end of game, but I think it could be anywhere in the script, anywhere in the game. Jaden Daniels, the bubble wraps off, to Mike's point, and we're going to talk about other rookies as well in that department. Okay, guys that aren't rookies: Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love. They're going to be doing battle. Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. Look, I think that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to absolutely curb stomp this Green Bay Packers team. With the way that they finished the season against the Chicago Bears, the undefeated in 2025 Chicago Bears, I fully anticipate the Philadelphia Eagles, off a good bit of rest, which was much earned and obviously much debated. This team, they missed out on the opportunity to get Saquon the record in the regular season. But look, there's still playoff records that we haven't even begun to scratch at here. And Saquon Barkley's well rested. The offensive line needed that breather. They were dinged up. And obviously, that's the strength of the Philadelphia Eagles. And the strength of the Packers at this point in the season is probably the defensive side of the ball. And when I see a group with the offensive line as talented as Philadelphia, you can take over a football game. Jalen Hurts, extremely experienced. Yeah, Jordan Love has gotten hot in the playoffs before. We've seen it recently. But I don't even know if he has feeling in his fingers at this point. And they've been very terse about his recovery. He's been limited at practice, but they are saying he's going to be playing. I know the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be hitting on all cylinders. And Vic Fangio, what a big game coordinator. I think 2 scores, the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Green Bay Packers by.
You had to bring up Week 18. You just had to. When they played the Bears, I get it that they lost. But that's like saying I'm worried about the Chiefs because they got blown out in Week 18. Now, so maybe not the
Nothing
same.
like that.
A lot of starters,
Nothing like that.
But they pulled starters in that game. And they weren't giving their best effort. And they said Jordan Love could have come back out there if they needed him. I do think it matters because anytime you have nerves involved, right, on a piece of your throwing arm, it's like that's the muscle memory is how you throw accurately a football. If you don't have that, if you have like your wires crossed a little bit, this is the playoffs. That stuff matters. So I am worried about that. And I don't think there's a lot of reasons to point to on this Green Bay roster where it's like they have an advantage here over Philly. It's like, no, that's why Philly's, was the 2 seed. It's like this is a darn good roster. But I do think the 1 point position I point to is OC. I think Matt LaFleur wipes the floor with Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator. I think the Philadelphia Eagles have truly underperformed the talent that they have there offensively this season. And so that's my one saving grace that I'm going to hang on to here and say that I disagree with you by 2 possessions. But it's hard for me to really sit here and say I'm confident in Green Bay heading into the postseason. They just did not inspire that in me the last 2 weeks of the year.
Yeah, to that point, Mike, right? You said they started pulling starters, but even when the starters were in there, it didn't look good in the first half versus Chicago Bears. And I think we talked about this earlier in the week on our pod on Wednesday or Thursday that I thought it was important for them to get Jordan Love in some type of rhythm in that game versus Chicago. Now, unfortunately, on the second drive, he gets his elbow hit and he loses feeling in his fingers. He has to come out. Malik Willis has to come in. But that's been the issue, Mike. What's the identity of this offense? I love Matt LaFleur, but it's like last year when they went on that run, he gave the gambit to Jordan Love, and he was able to, essentially be a point guard and pass the ball around, where this year they've kind of leaned on Josh Jacobs. So it's like you don't want to go into the playoffs not truly knowing what your identity is. Is it going to be led by Josh Jacobs, or is it going to be led by the quarterback Jordan Love? And I think that's the biggest concern. I'm with Kyle. I think this could get ugly. And I love this Green Bay team, but I just think they're going to be outmanned in this game. When you talk about position for position, player for player, the Philadelphia Eagles might have the most complete team in the NFL right now when you talk about each position. I think Green Bay is going to be in trouble in this game.
I'm getting double teamed here. I'm getting blown off the line by this double team I'm facing right now. I got to move on. We got to go to a different topic. Ravens Steelers, my bold prediction. It's going to be over by halftime. This game.
Yeah. Ooh.
I said earlier today, I think the Steelers try to play an ugly game. I think that's their route to success, is to make this as low scoring as possible. Try to keep this try to possess the ball for as long as possible when they have the ball. So I think they're just going to run the heck out of the football. But that's easier said than done against this Baltimore Ravens team that over the second half of the year is second in the NFL. Their defense is second in the NFL in EPA per play against. Everyone knows their offense.
Correct.
How nasty they've been, how they have one of the MVP front runners, how they have the second leading rusher in the NFL, the weapons on the outside at tight end or wide receiver. Everyone knows that. But this defense is a different animal. And the way the Steelers are coming into the playoffs over the last month, 14-point loss to the Eagles, 17-point loss to the Ravens, 19-point loss to the Chiefs, and then that 2-point loss to the Bengals in a game that they were still trying to win in Week 18. They just didn't inspire too much confidence in me. I just look at these two rosters, and it's just massively different. The only again, if we're talking about what's the chance here, it's that this is the third time around. They're
Mm-hmm.
intimately familiar with each other, and the Steelers have had good success over Lamar, and Lamar's obviously not been a pinnacle of himself in the playoffs. He hasn't been the guy we see in the regular season over the course of his career in the playoffs. That's your one saving grace, but I don't think it matters. I think this one is a blowout ultimately, and because of that, give me that the Ravens win this game before halftime.
Yeah.
We all get to have a nice night of sleep Saturday night is what I'll say.
That'll be great.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on this one too, Mike. I just think that the Steelers have outplayed the actual talent on their roster, right? I thought this would be for sure a season where Mike Tomlin would finally get a losing record, but he's squeezed every ounce of talent out of that roster so far. And I think we've seen it the last 4 weeks when they've played playoff caliber teams where they stack up against the rest of the NFL, more specifically the issues at the quarterback position, the issues on the offensive side of the ball as well. We're going to break this game down later, but if the Steelers have any chance, George Pickens has to be the alien that we appreciate on the field, not the antics that we don't appreciate on the field and off the field.
100%. Yeah, that's unfortunately, well, he's been more of a no-show than the alien here of late. And speaking of, we'll get to that, his matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens corners, as well as Chargers, Texans, right after a quick break. The NFL Wildcard Weekend kicks off 4:30 Eastern on Saturday with Chargers at Texans, the 5 seed and the 4 seed. It's the Texans' favorite spot. They played every single playoff game of their franchise in the Saturday 4:30 window. It's reserved for them, the honorary position. And the matchup to watch in this one, there is no better place to start than the strength on strength matchup. I think a top 5 offensive tackle unit for the Los Angeles Chargers against a top 5 pass rushing edge unit for the Houston Texans. I mean, top 5 is probably even conservative. These are top 3 units.
Correct.
At those respective positions with Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater for the Chargers, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson for the Houston Texans. Leger, I'm going to start with you. You go give me the defensive perspective here. How do we see this matchup playing out for the Texans?
This is big on big. I remember I was excited to see that Denver and Chargers game because I was looking forward to seeing Nick Bonito versus Rashawn Slater. And my goodness, Kyle, was that teach tape for Rashawn Slater. Like, Bonito didn't sniff the quarterback, and he had him out of his game. The thing is, defensive lineman, your game is it's all a setup, right? You want to set the offensive lineman up for 1 or 2 pass rush moves to win later on. And Nick Bonito has been able to win with speed. He's been able to win with power, but he couldn't do anything because Rashawn Slater kept him at bay the entire game. So Danielle Hunter has been one of the best defensive ends this year and probably one of the best free agent pickups this offseason that people actually haven't talked about enough when you talk about what he has done and then opposite of what Will Anderson has done too. And you see the combination and that duo and how productive they've been this year. So I can't wait to see that. Danielle Hunter got snubbed for the Pro Bowl. I thought he should have been a Pro Bowler. We'll see if he makes the All-Pro list. But I guarantee he's pissed off about that a little bit, right? And he's going to be excited to go against one of the best in Rashawn Slater, who most likely will be an All-Pro himself. So that's, to me, this is where this game is going to be won. Yes, you can talk about the physicalness of the run game with J.K. Dobbins and that Chargers offensive line. But when Justin Herbert has to go back and pass, right? Because I love Derek Stingley. I think he's going to take out most likely Quentin Johnson, and we'll see what they do with Ladd McConkey. Do they roll the coverage to him? But if Justin Herbert is going to have time, it's going to be because of these bookend tackles. That's the thing. The Texans defensive ends, they haven't given quarterbacks time, right? So to me, this is going to be the premier battle for this game to decide who wins it.
You know, we often say that we need to protect our stars. And I remember when I was first getting into the league, it was Andrew Luck who was getting abused week in, week out in a lack of a clean dish and getting beat up because you just don't have offensive line. I give a tremendous amount of credit to the Chargers for the foresight to not only draft Slater, but then go get Alt. And they've both been absolute stalwarts for them. Joe Alt is a superstar. And I got to give a ton of credit to the Texans edge rushers with Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter. I played against Danielle Hunter a number of times. It looked like like an avatar walked off the sideline. If you see him in person, I mean, he's bigger than you think, leaner than you think, and way more jacked than you think. He's one of those rushers that gets you out of your technique. When you just look at him, you're like, I got to get to my spot quicker. I give a tremendous amount of credit to the Chargers, though, because these are two tackles that are stuck in their ways. They are confident in their landmarks, and they are not going to change the way that they play. Joe Alt is a football machine. I know where he was created. I know who created him. And I understand that those things just don't change. I take a look around the league, Quentin Nelson, Zach Martin, guys who played at Notre Dame under Harry Hiestand. Joe Alt is going to have a game plan. He's not going to deviate from it. And you said it best. Your rushes are intended to set up a win down the road. You may not be looking to go pin seeking every single time you put the ball on the tee, but you're setting yourself up for your next shot. Joe Alt understands that. He's not going to change the way that he sets. You're going to have to beat essentially an AI robot out there at tackle. And Rashawn Slater, an absolute freak show. So that's always what I'm looking for is, can you get Joe Alt to deviate from his plan? And I don't think he does. I think if you have a chance, it's going to be against Rashawn Slater.
Yeah, as much as, we talked about probably at the beginning of the season, Joe Alt for rookie was awesome. Down the stretch, it turned into he was awesome for a rookie to this guy's just awesome for an NFL offensive tackle. The second half of this season, he already looked like a Pro Bowler. He did not allow more than 2 pressures in any single game from week 9 on. The guy was just lights out, difficult to get by, and he'll probably get matched up against Danielle Hunter the majority of the time. And obviously, Danielle will get his here and there. But if I'm scoring this matchup, for as much as that's like where the Texans pressure, they're not a blitz heavy team. They're not getting creative with that defensive front the way we talk about someone like the Denver Broncos, someone like the Minnesota Vikings that we'll touch on later. They just let those guys cook, and rightfully so, because they're that good that they can just win those one-on-ones. I don't think that's going to be the case in this one, and why I am a fan of the Chargers in this matchup, because one of the biggest reasons why the Texas defense is so dominant, I think the Chargers are uniquely qualified to neutralize. All right, let's get to the game, the nightcap on Sunday night, the 8 p.m. game, Steelers, Ravens. We wanted to start with Pickens versus Baltimore's corners, but I wanted to shift gears a little bit because the news just came out that Zay Flowers, the star wide receiver, leading wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens, not going to be playing in this one. Knee injury, out against the Steelers. How big is this for the Baltimore Ravens? Could this, I mean, I don't think this week it's that massive, but if he's not healthy, how much of an impact, Lachey, do you think this is for them and their Super Bowl hopes?
It's massive because he's the perfect receiver for what they like to do schematically, right? They have a physical downhill run game, and we talk about this, Mike. Zay Flowers is one of the best separators in all of football, and because everybody wants to stop the Ravens running the football, he gets a lot of man coverage, and he's one of the best at separating from man coverages. So people talk about all year long how the Ravens have had the most separation in regards to space for Lamar to throw the football to go to his receivers. Bateman's another really good separator as well. So these guys are a benefit for what they do on offense because they run the ball so well and effectively that you get man coverage on the outside. And that's why Zay Flowers was a Pro Bowl receiver this year. Those deep over routes, he just runs away from defensive backs. So to your point, I don't know if it's going to be that big of an issue this week, but going down the stretch, say they were to advance and Buffalo advances as well, that's going to be a cause for concern for this Baltimore team if they want to make that run to the Super Bowl, because he's a key cog in what they want to do, passing the ball down the field. They work hand in hand together, the run game and the pass game. It's married for the Baltimore Ravens. And you see right there how the offensive yards per play go down when Zay Flowers is off the field, in the rush as well, too, because he is so fast. Even if you go man coverage, you do want to keep that other safety out of the box, and you have to because of the speed that Bateman and Zay Flowers bring on the field. So it's a big loss. Again, to your point, Mike, we'll see how long this injury lingers. If it's just a 1 week thing, I think the Baltimore Ravens will be okay. But if this is something that's going to be a few weeks, it's a cause for concern if you're this Ravens offense.
I think this Ravens offense had obviously an understanding that Zay Flowers was not going to be out there with the team. And if he was, it was going to be one of those miracle recoveries. We saw in the replay the way that he grabbed at that leg. And as a player, you know that when you grab at it instantaneously and you wince, there is a lot of pain there. And it's obvious that he's dealing with something. But as it pertains to the Ravens and moving forward offensively, this is a group that had some changes in terms of production throughout the course of the year. Mark Andrews was seemingly not a part of the operation early on. He ends up becoming the leading touchdown scorer in the National Football League at the tight end position. You might have to stat check me there, but he's damn close. I think we're going to see a heavy dose of the tight ends. I mean, obviously Zay Flowers is a huge part of their offense. He's a leading receiver. He's got 1,000 yards. He's a guy that in the scramble drill, Lamar Jackson can rely on to be eye to eye with him and stay mirrored at the third, second level of the defense. But with Derrick Henry and those two tight ends, you still have the ability to cause suck on that second level of defense. And when I say suck, it's really respect. It's the guys looking at the mesh point, following Derrick Henry. Second level's got to come up. It's going to provide a lot of opportunities for maybe Lamar Jackson to run some more. Without Zay Flowers, you lose that explosive edge, but you can still matriculate the football down the field. On and off the field stat, I like that. But that's with a game plan to have Zay Flowers in the lineup. Without Zay Flowers in the lineup, how does the game plan deviate? And might they like it just as much?
Yeah, I have to agree that not this week, but going forward, this is a massive blow. He's just so talented, and the running game is predicated on it because they have to go too high when Zay's on the field. Like you gotta put a safety over the top of this guy, or his post corners and things of that nature are just gonna kill you as a defense. So on the flip side, though, George Pickens, back in week 11 when they won, when the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Baltimore Ravens, he had 12 targets, 8 catches, 89 yards. So he was a big factor in that passing game. Doesn't play the second matchup, and Baltimore blows them out. Has come back from that hamstring injury, but since the hamstring injury, guy's been a complete non-factor. I mean, he couldn't catch a cold in week 18. Do we foresee him showing up here? Which George Pickens are we getting, Kyle, this week?
I surely would imagine that we're going to see a fiery George Pickens. It's never for a lack of explosion. You know, it's the lack of focus that I'm concerned about, and the lack of staying locked in, staying involved, playing the next play. You know, as a pitcher in baseball, I had an explosive personality, and I gave up a lot of home runs by nature of the fact that I threw hard. If you hit the ball, it was going to go very far. And if you hit it properly, it was going to leave the stadium. It was on me to be able to move on to the next batter. And I feel like the quicker that George Pickens moves on to the next play and adopts that mentality, the Pittsburgh Steelers will be better for it. Maybe some pancake blocks in the running game, but I fully anticipate that if they haven't rallied around this guy in the locker room, we're still going to see a liability in the emotions department.
This is where we'll see if Mike Tomlin truly still has a grasp on the locker room and the temperature of the locker room, because he's dealt with receivers that have been fiery, that have been quote unquote divas. When you talk about Antonio Brown, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, and he's been able to get the best out of all of them. And even George Pickens, you can throw him in there as well. He has a handshake with his head coach, right? You rarely see that in the NFL. So they have a special bond and relationship. So I would assume, to your point, Mike, after a lackluster performance last week where he had 3 drops that were just god awful, that you're not accustomed to seeing George Pickens do, and him talking to the fans and going back and forth with the fans, that Mike Tomlin will take this guy aside and do whatever it takes to get the guy that we saw earlier this year that was on the same page with Russell Wilson, because they have not been on the same page. You talked about it, Mike. He missed a few games with the hamstring, and ever since he's come back, it just has not been the same. So I believe we will get the best effort, but I still think the Baltimore Ravens will outclass them in this game.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think he shows up. I think he's locked in. I don't think it matters. This Ravens secondary is playing too well. All right, we're going to take a quick break after that. Broncos, Bills, Packers, Eagles, the start of the Sunday slate. We're going to preview right after this. Sunday slate of games kicks off as the Broncos travel to the Buffalo Bills. And the matchup I want to focus on here, fellas, it's Josh Allen. Basically, the one-man show on offense. Not his arm, because I don't know if there'll be too many opportunities with his arm. We all know about this Broncos defense and what they can do in the secondary. Number one defense in the NFL this year against the pass in terms of EPA per play. But it's Josh Allen's legs. 500 rushing yards this season, 12 rushing touchdowns, and he's going up against a defense that they throw the kitchen sink at you from a blitz perspective, from a stunt perspective, but that leaves holes in that defense. Kyle, what do we think Josh Allen's performance looks like on Sunday? How do we think his game's going to go? And specifically from a rushing perspective, what's he going to be doing?
First and foremost, highly disrespectful of you to say one-man show when you know for damn sure I'm about to talk about the 5 hogs up front and Aaron Kromer's offensive line.
I got a good old line.
And you know what? Yeah. This has been the cleanest quarterback in the National Football League this year, and a lot of that falls on the offensive line. Yes, Josh has been fantastic. He may win the MVP, but at the end of the day, you got to give your flowers to this O-line. And I think that Josh Allen will thrive. They understand the challenge, and they're going to rise to it. Luckily, they're at home in front of a raucous crowd, and they need to jump on the Broncos early. But when Josh Allen gets loose, it is a real problem. And I know you talked about his legs, but I'm going to talk about ass a little bit because he comes with some ass behind him. And when he hits you on the second level or the third level and you got to make a business decision, I'll tell you what, a lot of guys are opting out of that interaction because Josh Allen is terribly strong, terribly fast. We saw it against the Kansas City Chiefs in crunch time. He can put the team on his back, the offense on his back.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because he has been Superman when they needed him the most. And we could have went strength on strength, kind of like we did for the Chargers in the Houston Texans game, because when you look at this, the Bills have given up the least amount of sacks in the NFL this year, and the Broncos have created the most sacks on defense. But I want to specifically talk about Josh Allen's legs and the Broncos' ability to rush with pass rush lane discipline. And when I say pass rush lane discipline, not creating canvases for the quarterback to not only look downfield and throw it, but to maybe even step up in the pocket and run. Kyle, you hit it on the head. We saw what Josh Allen did versus Kansas City. Like, the one thing you don't want to allow Josh Allen to do is to roll out to his right or to step up in the pocket, because you have no chance on defense if that happens, because he is like a cyborg. You talk about how hard it is to bring down, but this dude can throw the ball and put it anywhere on the field. There's literally plays you're watching on film where you think he's just running out of bounds, and then at the last second, he chucks it 40 yards down the field for a completion. And as a defender, you're like, what else are we going to do? So that's what I'm going to be tuned into this game. Can the defensive line, and you talked about it, Mike, how exotic they are with blitzes. So this goes for the safeties, the linebackers, anybody rushing. You got to have pass rush lane discipline. You can't have two guys in one gap and create a hole, and you can't out leverage Josh Allen in regards to running past the quarterback, allowing him to step up. You have to be disciplined against him, or Josh Allen will make your life hell on defense.
And what I think Buffalo will do in this matchup, it's a little bit of a prediction for you. I think what they'll do, they use 6 offensive linemen more than any team in the NFL. Alec Anderson's their usual 6th offensive lineman. They do it more than any team in the NFL. If you're playing man coverage a lot, that means if you put a 6th offensive lineman out there, you have a guy basically assigned to that guy to play man coverage. And so the more they can get into that package, that wastes a defender in some way, and that he has to kind of still have eyes on him because he is technically available as an eligible receiver. But then that gives you rush lanes at the quarterback position when you just give one more gap that the defensive line has to account for in their rush packages, their blitz packages. That I think we see a heavy emphasis on that for the Buffalo Bills, knowing that that'll give them more time offensively, give Josh Allen more time to work, more time for the wide receivers to get open, and just give him that extra second and extra gap in that offensive line should he go and run. All right, let's get to the other game here on Sunday. Packers, Eagles. Packers travel to Philadelphia. Big dogs. You guys already given them no chance whatsoever in this game. But I wanted to start with where the Eagles thrive and where the Packers surprisingly have been okay this year. The Eagles rushing game, number 1 in the NFL by whatever metric you want to go for. Efficiency, effectiveness, total, it's all there. They are dominant. There's no doubt about that. The Packers have quietly been the 7th best defense in against the run in EPA per play this season. They have held their own on a week in and week out basis, but is there any chance they hold their own against this Philadelphia Eagles team, Kyle?
Uh, Honestly, no. In terms of what we're asking right now, do I think that a
Yeah.
well-rested Philadelphia Eagles offensive line in Philadelphia in round one of the playoffs is going to not dominate the Green Bay Packers front seven? And I just say that's going to happen. And we talk often about defenses winning championships. I think run games travel, but they're even better at home because when you're at home, you get to communicate with your guys as to who we're going to. If the linebackers are on a string, you can have the conversations pre-snap. If there's mug looks from the Packers, you can communicate that, sort it out, use the play clock to your advantage, get it all the way down to zero. I don't care. But the most important reason why I think that the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line in this run game is going to have incredible success is because they're going to protect their quarterback, Jalen Hurts. And they understand that probably without Jalen Hurts, we're not going to, you can throw all those records out the window from the regular season because without Jalen Hurts, we won't be able to attain a Super Bowl win. And I think that early on in the playoffs, we're going to see a heavy dose of running the football. Saquon Barkley sees the light at the end of the tunnel. It's in New Orleans. It's with a Super Bowl win, and they can do it on his shoulders and his quads. I can't wait to watch the Philadelphia O-line dominate the Green Bay Packers.
Mike and Kyle, when you look at this game, right, we're talking about the Packers run defense versus that potent Eagles rushing attack. I think I would feel a lot more comfortable if Jair Alexander, and I know we're talking about the run defense, but if Jair Alexander was playing on the outside, because when you're facing the Philadelphia Eagles, it's like, do you want death by 1,000 paper cuts in regards to the run game? Or do you want to give up the explosive pass plays to Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown? And I say that in regards to Jair Alexander because that Green Bay defense is just totally different when he's on the field. Like the energy that he brings to that defense, you can man him up with an A.J. Brown. We saw what he did to Justin Jefferson, and we saw what he did to CeeDee Lamb last year in the playoffs. Like this guy plays at a different level. And Kyle, there's always one guy on the team that kind of brings that juice every day. And that is their energy starter, and they don't have him. So when I look at this game, the guys in the interior defensive line, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, Kobe Wooten, and then the two linebackers, Edrin Cooper, and it looks like Quay Walker will play. He's missed a couple games. He's practicing this week. They have to be man amongst boys because you got to pick your poison. It's just like, do we put an extra guy in the box and have our backup corners go against Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown? Or do those guys that I just mentioned, those four guys more specifically, they got to be grown men versus a grown offensive line to mitigate this run game. That way you can give help to your corners on the outside. And that right there is the conundrum for the Green Bay Packers when you're talking about trying to slow down this Philadelphia Eagles offense.
Yeah, I actually do think they could stop the rush. Slow down the Eagles rushing offense. But what it would take
you just got to slow it
is
down.
what you just mentioned. They are going to have to put every resource possible. It's going to have to be single high every single snap, extra guy in the box, because I think they have the players to do it. Edrin Cooper, since he took over as starter, second half of this season, highest run stop percentage in the NFL. The guy plays on the opposite line of the line of scrimmage as well as any linebacker in the NFL, and he's just a rookie. He has transformed their run defense in that way. But then when you play in single high every snap, that means A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith have one-on-ones every snap. So it's like you're picking your poison here. I do think that they'll pick that poison. They'll say, we'll play the high-risk game of letting our corners get those one-on-ones. We'll maybe give up some big plays, but we can't get gashed and can't just get leaned on by this Eagles front all day long. That's not the way that that's not going to give them a chance to win. It just flat out isn't. So I think that's their strategy, but ultimately it is going to be which way do you want to be killed by this Eagles offense? More often than not, it's been the running game, but I think they still could do it through the air with the way the Packers corners are. So I agree. The Jair Alexander injury really puts them behind the eight ball. All right, that's the early Sunday games. We got Commanders, Bucks, Vikings, Rams, the final two games of Wildcard Weekend. We're previewing the matchups that are going to decide it right after this. Commanders Bucks, the Sunday night game. Tampa Bay, obviously the home team as the NFC South champions. but the Commanders still favored. Or no, they're not favored in that one. The 3-point dogs in that one. But the matchup we want to watch is the matchup we've been waiting for a while, because this man got traded out of the division and still facing his nemesis, Marshawn Lattimore, the cornerback for the Washington Commanders, against Mike Evans, the wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Bucks. They played earlier this year. Mike Evans wasn't healthy. Going back to last year, Marshawn Lattimore wasn't healthy in the second game of that year.
Yep.
First game of that year, Mike Evans got banged up. So we really haven't seen the firework matchup that always almost ends in some sort of punch, some sort of jawing since 2022. So it's long overdue. We're getting at the very first week of this postseason. Who comes out on top, Leger, in this matchup?
I don't want to, berate or downplay anything that Mike Evans has done. And you see the numbers right there in 13 games with Marshawn Lattimore. He's really limited him to only 23.8 yards per game when he's been the primary defender. And when you look at the last 5 meetings against Mike Evans with Lattimore as the primary defender, he's held him to 4 receptions for 57 yards and only 5 targets, which means he's not seeing the ball when Marshawn Lattimore is on him. You go back to when Marshawn Lattimore was actually a little bit healthy earlier this season versus the Eagles. He did an amazing job on A.J. Brown, but unfortunately, guys, we didn't see him long because he re-aggravated the hamstring injury. And I think I don't want to say funny. I don't think that's the right word, but like both of these guys are dealing with hamstring injuries, right? And they're nemesis and they're playing in this game. And I thank the football gods for allowing this to happen, because we didn't think it would maybe happen with Marshawn Lattimore being traded out of the NFC South to the Washington Commanders. I'm going to give the edge to Marshawn Lattimore. I feel like he's been on the sideline the last few weeks. He's trying to get healthy. He's going to be well rested. He knows why they brought him over. They had a real Achilles heel at the cornerback position for the Washington Commanders. When these two teams played, and that was the biggest difference between this game, it was Emmanuel Forbes, who they took in the first round, who was no longer even on the team, and Benjamin St. Juste is the starting quarterback, who has been benched. So they have a totally different secondary in regards to the secondary that played against the Tampa Bay Bucks earlier this year. And I can't wait to see Marshawn Lattimore follow Mike Evans. He's a bigger corner. He's physical. And that actually throws off that timing with Mike Evans and every quarterback he's been with since Marshawn Lattimore has been on him. So this will be a real interesting matchup. And I think whoever wins this matchup, it can go a long way into who wins this game.
Hot take. I think Liam Cohen would be happy to see Marshawn Lattimore just dedicating his time to Mike Evans, because we've seen time and time again this year, Liam Cohen and his brilliance be able to scheme up ways to get skilled players the ball. And it doesn't even have to be a bounce pass, but he's going to find a way to create explosive plays with the running back at the tight end position. We've seen other guys come along outside of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I really love Liam Cohen. I really love this heavyweight matchup between Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore. We've talked about it. There's been big time fights, brawls, trash talk the whole way through, and we'll probably get that. So in that regard, I'll give the edge to Marshawn Lattimore, and let's hope that they can both be out there unscathed by the hamstrings. But I think Liam Cohen is kind of licking his chops, knowing, and Mike Evans knows that he's going to get that special attention from Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, this feels like one of those boxing matches where, like a Rocky, where they're like past their prime, right? But when they show up and when they go at it, everyone's still tuned in, right? It doesn't make it any less exciting, the fact that neither of them are at the top of their game anymore, or that they're coming in hampered. I'm still going to be tuned in. I'm still going to be locked in. But I do agree that I don't know if this matchup necessarily decides it. But the crazy thing is we just haven't seen this Commanders team with Marshawn Lattimore. We had the Saints game. Yeah. We had a little bit of the Eagles game. And that was all we got. And he's truly still a number one corner in the NFL. He may not be like a top 5 guy anymore, but he's a top 15 guy when he was healthy for the New Orleans Saints. And the guy is uniquely qualified. We saw the numbers against Mike Evans to go toe-to-toe with a physical wide receiver like
Dragon Slayer.
He has that. He has that to his game. So if you're looking for reasons to buy into Leger's bold prediction, I think this is yet another one that we're going to give the tick box to the Commanders when it's all said and done. All right, let's get to the Monday Night Football game. Probably they're all such good matchups, but I think this one really stands out to me because of the intrigue in so many different ways, shapes, and forms in this one. You got the head coach versus his protege in Kevin O'Connell. Yep. You have the one team that was able to beat the Vikings this year outside of the Detroit Lions. And you have the Vikings blitz packages against the wily vet, Matt Stafford, who's seen it all. Sean McVay, seen it all at this point. The worst team they could have picked to match up with in the first round of the playoffs. Leger, how do you see Brian Flores and all he does on the defensive side of the football? How do you see that being able to affect Matt Stafford, or does it not affect it? And do they leave some holes for him to throw in behind that blitz?
Yeah, so this is the thing when you talk about this, and I can't wait to bring Kyle in on this discussion because so much is predicated on the communication up front with the offensive line when you're talking about what Brian Flores likes to do in regards to the pressure package. And we see Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel right there, one of the best edge duos in all of football. Both guys were named to the Pro Bowl, and rightfully so. 23 and a half sacks between the two of them this year. And that's the thing with what Brian Flores does. They give you so many stems and shifts right before the ball is snapped that you have to over-communicate on the offensive line. Now, the Rams do a really good job of max protecting, keeping their running back and sometimes even tight ends in, so they will pick it up. But the thing about the Vikings that make them so good is when they drop back in that fire zone coverage, they're so meticulous on where they drop, right? So they're going to take away your first read, which forces you to hold the ball. And they just feel like they're gonna out hustle and out pressure your guys, and they want it more. They're going to reach and dig deep a little bit more than you. So that's going to be the matchup. You have to have answers for the pressure. Like you said, Matt Stafford's played a long time. Sean McVay, has been a coach for a while, one of the top offensive play callers in all of football. So you got to have answers for that, and you got to protect up front. You got to communicate well in protection, or it's going to be a long day versus Vikings defense.
All right, that's the Vikings-Rams Monday night. I am very excited to see it. Like I said, my favorite matchup of the weekend. And because of that, because it's an ultimate chess match, two of the best at their respective positions in terms of DC Brian Flores against OC Sean McVay. That's the true, that's what makes football, in my opinion, the best sport in the world, is that you don't get that in other sports the way that you do in the NFL. Like that, because the game plans they come up with, the decisions they make, are as important, if not more so, than what's on the football field on Sunday, just because of how intricate the game of football is. So you got to love it. We're going to take a quick break. After that, going to get to our survivor pool picks for the NFL playoffs. Right after this. Now we're doing survivor pool picks throughout the playoffs here. The rules: each host picks a team to win their game in advance. Host cannot pick the same team as another host. That one screwed me because we picked these beforehand and I got last pick. If your team loses out, you are out. Who loses, you're out. If your team wins, you cannot pick them again for the rest of the playoffs. Last host standing wins. Kyle, I believe you had the first overall pick, I believe. So
I guess, and I probably took the team that you were going to take because
I think you took the team everyone's going to take.
This is a lock, and if history tells me anything, the Ravens will win, but they're probably going to end up losing somewhere in the playoffs. So I don't have to play them again. I don't have to use them again. Ravens is my pick.
Perfect.
No, actually, I picked first, and I picked the Eagles for everything that we talked about on this show. I just think the Eagles will outclass the Packers, and I actually want to be able to pick the Ravens later on, so that's why I didn't choose them. So I picked the Eagles to win this weekend.
So you're just a hater. I get it. You're just a hater. Okay. I got screwed. I got the last pick, and I'm going to go Minnesota Vikings. They're not a huge favorite. They're on the road. They lost the Rams already, but I just think they're so much better. They just outclassed them from a talent perspective. Ivan Pace Jr. back in that game. We were raving about him versus Kyron Williams, how that's going to be must-see TV. Ivan Pace Jr. Washington blitz, though. I'm not sure anyone I trust to block him head-to-head. So I'm going to go with the Minnesota Vikings. I'm also going to go with Notre Dame Fighting Irish to beat Penn State tonight.
Oh, there it is.
We didn't have producer Stryker here, but if you're doing a college football pool, it's got to be Notre Dame, right, fellas? We picking Notre Dame tonight. We picking Penn State.
They got the best offensive line, right? They got the best. It's Abdul Carter versus the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So I'm going to take.
He's a little banged up.
My guys from the Golden Dome place.
Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. I like the Nittany Lions tonight.
All right, there you have it. Pushing the pile. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Monday. Until then, keep pushing.